She gave him 3 chances. She kept her hands on the wheel. She offered her ID. But Officer Greg Patterson didn't see a decorated U.S. colonel returning from a classified briefing. He only saw a woman in a luxury car who didn't belong. What happens in the next 40 minutes on a lonely Georgia highway isn't just a traffic stop, it is a systematic dismantling of an ego. You are about to witness the moment a bully realizes he picked a fight with the entire United States Army. This is the story of Colonel Cynthia Reynolds, and the traffic stop that ended a career. The rain in Oak Haven County didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime stick harder. It was 10:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of humid, sticky night where the air felt like a wet wool blanket. Officer Greg Patterson sat in his cruiser, idling behind a billboard off Interstate 95. The radar gun was in his lap, but he wasn't really looking at the numbers. He was looking for a feeling. That's what he told his rookie partner, Alexander Jenkins, who was sitting in the passenger seat, trying to eat a cold sandwich without making a mess. You see that? Patterson pointed a thick finger at a passing minivan. Too careful. Doing exactly 55. Suspicious. Alexander swallowed a bite of turkey. Or maybe they're just safe drivers. Greg, it's pouring rain. Patterson scoffed, adjusting his belt. He was a 15-year veteran of the force, a man whose physique had slowly shifted from linebacker muscle to barstool bulk. He had a reputation in the precinct, effective, they said, aggressive. Internal Affairs had noted twice. He survived the complaints because he knew how to walk the line. He knew who he could push and who he couldn't. Or at least, he thought he did. There, Patterson said, his eyes narrowing. A charcoal-grey Range Rover autobiography glided past. It was dark, sleek, and expensive. The tint was legal, but just dark enough to obscure the driver. It was moving at a steady 60 miles per hour in a 55 zone. Technical speeding, but usually ignored. 5 over, Alexander asked, raising an eyebrow. Really? It's not the speed. Jenkins, it's the car. $100,000 ride. Out-of-state plates. Virginia tag. Patterson shifted the cruiser into drive, the engine growling as he pulled out onto the wet asphalt. Drug runners love rentals, or they buy these flash cars to blend in with the rich folks. But they don't know the roads. It doesn't look like a rental, Alexander muttered, checking the computer. Tags come back to a Reynolds, no warrants, clean record. Reynolds, Patterson repeated, tasting the name. Let's see who Reynolds is. Inside the Range Rover, Colonel Cynthia Reynolds was listening to an audiobook on geopolitical strategy. She was tired. Her bones ached with a deep, marrow-level fatigue that only comes from 3 weeks of Joint Task Force simulations at Fort Stewart. She was 42, though she looked 35, with skin the color of deep mahogany and eyes that had seen combat theaters in 3 different decades. She wasn't in uniform. Her dress blues were hanging carefully in the back, shielded by a dry-cleaning bag. She was wearing a simple grey hoodie and leggings, comfortable clothes for the long drive back to the Pentagon housing in Arlington. She checked her rearview mirror. The headlights behind her had been trailing for 2 miles. She knew the profile of a Ford Explorer Interceptor. Steady, she whispered to herself. She wasn't worried. She was a colonel in the United States Army, a logistician who managed budgets larger than the GDP of some small nations. A traffic ticket was an annoyance, nothing more. Then, the lights flared, blue and red, blinding in the rear-view mirror, bouncing off the raindrops on the glass. "Here we go," she sighed, turning down the audiobook. She signaled right, moved over slowly, and came to a stop on the gravel shoulder. She did everything by the book. Engine off, interior light on, window down, hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. She waited. Back in the cruiser. Patterson was taking his time. He liked to let them stew. It made them nervous. If they were nervous, they made mistakes. "Run the plate again," Patterson ordered. I did. "Greg, it's clean. Cynthia Reynolds. 42. No priors. Not even a parking ticket in the system," Alexander said, sounding bored. "Maybe we just let this one go. It's pouring. You don't get the big busts by staying dry. Rookie." Patterson grabbed his hat, jamming it onto his head. He ignored his raincoat. He wanted to look imposing, a dark figure in the storm. "Watch the hands." Patterson stepped out. The rain hit him instantly, soaking his shoulders. He walked with a swagger, hand hovering near his holster. He approached the passenger side first, peering in. The back seat was empty, save for a hanging garment bag. He couldn't see what was inside it. He circled around the back of the Rover to the driver's side. He stopped just behind the B-pillar, a tactical position. "License and registration," he barked, not waiting for a greeting. Cynthia didn't turn her head. She kept her eyes forward, looking at him through the side mirror. "Good evening, officer. My license is in my center console. My registration is in the glove box. I am reaching for them now." Her voice was calm. Too calm. It irritated Patterson instantly. He expected fear. He expected frantic apologies or nervous stammering. He didn't expect a voice that sounded like it was giving a briefing. "I didn't tell you to reach for anything," Patterson shouted, slapping the roof of the car. "Keep your hands on the wheel." Cynthia froze. Her hands returned to 10 and 2 instantly. She took a slow breath. She had dealt with warlords in Kandahar who were more reasonable than this. "Officer," she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming steelier. "I am complying with your orders. You asked for documentation. I cannot provide it without moving my hands. Don't you get smart with me." Patterson leaned down, his face inches from the open window. The smell of stale coffee and wet polyester wafted into the luxury car. "I smelled alcohol. You been drinking tonight?" Cynthia turned her head slowly to look at him. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and utterly unimpressed. "I have not. I have been driving for 4 hours from Fort Stewart." "Fort Stewart? Huh," Patterson sneered. "What? You someone's girlfriend on the base, visiting the boyfriend." It was a low blow, a calculated insult designed to demean her. He looked at a black woman in a luxury car and assumed she was an accessory, not the owner. "I am stationed there temporarily," Cynthia said, her jaw tightening. "Officer, why have you pulled me over?" "You were weaving." Patterson lied. Smoothly. "Cross the fog line 3 times. Reckless driving. Now, step out of the car." Cynthia paused. "Step out for a lane violation. In the rain." "I said step out of the vehicle." Patterson grabbed the door handle and yanked it open. "Now." The rain whipped into the plush leather interior of the Range Rover. Cynthia looked at the open door, then up at the officer. This was wrong, procedurally, tactically, and legally. This was going off the rails. "Officer," Cynthia said, unbuckling her seatbelt with deliberate slowness. "I want to inform you that I am an active duty service member. My identification is in the console. If you look at it, we can resolve this." "I don't care who you think you are," Patterson spat, grabbing her wrist. "Get out." He pulled. He didn't need to. Cynthia was already moving, stepping out into the mud and gravel. She was tall, 5'9", and fit. She stood almost eye level with him. She didn't flinch as the rain soaked her hoodie. "Turn around. Hands on the hood," Patterson commanded. "Am I under arrest?" Cynthia asked, not moving. "You're being detained for investigation of DUI and resisting a lawful order," Patterson said, enjoying the power trip. He spun her around, perhaps a little too roughly, pushing her chest against the wet metal of her own car. Inside the cruiser, Officer Alexander Jenkins was watching with growing unease. She turned on the dashcam audio, ensuring it was recording. She had a feeling this was bad. She opened her door and jogged over, the rain plastering her hair to her face. "Greg," Alexander said, breathless. "Greg, take it easy. She's not resisting. She's got an attitude. Jenkins!" Patterson grunted, patting Cynthia down. His hands were invasive, searching pockets, patting down her legs. It was a frisk for weapons, but he was making it humiliating. "Officer," Cynthia said, her face pressed against the cold metal. "You are making a mistake. In the back seat of my vehicle is my dress uniform. In the center console is my common access card, showing my rank as Colonel in the United States Army. I advise you to check them." Patterson paused. "Colonel." He looked at her. "Hoodie? Leggings? Sneakers?" "Yeah, right." He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "And I'm the King of England. Stolen valor is a crime, too. Sweetheart, you buy that uniform at a surplus store, trying to get out of a ticket. Check the ID," Cynthia said. Every word a hammer blow. Patterson ignored her. He was too deep in now. If he backed down, he looked weak in front of the rookie. If he admitted he was wrong, he lost face. So, he doubled down. It was the bully's only tactic. "You're under arrest," Patterson announced. "Disorderly conduct, public intoxication, resisting arrest." He grabbed her wrists behind her back. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked tight, too tight. "You are injuring me," Cynthia stated objectively. "I have a rotator cuff injury from service. Loosen the cuffs." "Comfort isn't my priority," Patterson sneered. He shoved her toward the cruiser as he marched her past the back window of the Range Rover. Alexander Jenkins lingered. She had a gnawing feeling in her gut. The woman was too calm. Crazy people screamed. Guilty people ran. This woman was acting like she was in command. Alexander pulled a flashlight from her belt and shined it into the back seat of the Range Rover. The beam cut through the tint. It illuminated the dry cleaning bag. The plastic was partially torn at the bottom. Alexander saw the fabric, dark blue, the gold stripe down the leg. She moved the light up. The sleeve, gold braid, and there, pinned to the shoulder, was the rank insignia, an eagle. Alexander's blood ran cold. She knew military ranks. Her brother was in the Marines. That wasn't just a uniform. That was a full-bird colonel, and on the seat next to it, a hat with gold scrambling on the brim. "Greg," Alexander shouted, her voice cracking. "Greg, stop." Patterson was already shoving Cynthia into the back of the cruiser. "Shut it. Jenkins, I got this." "Greg, look at the back seat." Alexander ran over, grabbing Patterson's arm just as he was about to slam the door on Cynthia's legs. "What is your problem?" Patterson whipped around, face red. "She's telling the truth," Alexander hissed, pointing at the Range Rover. "That's a colonel's uniform, a real one. And I see a folder on the seat. It's stamped Department of Defense." Patterson looked at his partner, then at the woman in the back of his car. Cynthia Reynolds sat awkwardly, handcuffed, wet, and humiliated. But her expression hadn't changed. She looked at Patterson with a gaze that wasn't angry anymore. It was pitying. It was the look a judge gives a man before sentencing him to life. "Officer Patterson," Cynthia said from the back seat, "you have just detained a superior officer on federal business. I strongly suggest you call your watch commander. And while you are at it, I would like you to retrieve my phone. I need to make a call to the provost marshal." Patterson felt the first trickle of true fear, but his pride was a fortress. "It's a prop," he muttered, trying to convince himself. "It's a fake." "Greg," Alexander whispered, terrified. "The license plate. Reynolds. I just realized. The base commander at Fort Stewart. His last name is Reynolds. She might be his wife, or she might be him." "Get the ID," Patterson croaked. His throat felt dry, despite the rain. "Go get the ID from the console." Alexander ran to the Range Rover. She opened the console. She found the wallet. She pulled out the CAC card. She walked back to Patterson, her hand trembling. She held up the card in the rain. Reynolds, Cynthia J. Pay grade. 06 United States Army. Patterson stared at the card. The face on the ID was the same face staring at him from the back of his cruiser. He had just handcuffed a colonel. And he hadn't just handcuffed her. He had insulted her, manhandled her, and fabricated a DUI charge on a federal officer. "Uncuff her," Alexander whispered. "Greg, uncuff her right now and pray she doesn't ruin us." Patterson opened the door. He reached for the cuffs. "Don't touch me," Cynthia said. Patterson froze. "Mom, I need to take the cuffs off." "No," Cynthia said. "You leave them on. I want the body cam footage to show exactly how long I remained in these restraints. You are going to call your supervisor." "Now?" "Ma'am, please, it was a mistake," Patterson stammered, the bully dissolving into a coward. "I didn't know. The tint. The rain." "You didn't know I was a colonel," Cynthia corrected him. "But you knew I was a black woman in a nice car. And that was enough for you, wasn't it?" She leaned back against the hard plastic seat. "Make the call, Officer Patterson, or I will make a call that will bring the military police down here, and I promise you, their jurisdiction discussion will be much less pleasant." Patterson stood in the rain, water dripping off the brim of his hat, realizing his life was effectively over. But the night was just beginning. The silence in the back of a police cruiser is heavy. It smells of stale sweat, industrial cleaner, and the lingering fear of the hundreds of people who sat there before. Colonel Cynthia Reynolds sat straight-backed, her wrists aching against the cold steel of the handcuffs, her eyes fixed on the rain-streaked partition. Outside, the dynamic had shifted violently. Officer Patterson was no longer the hunter. He was a man standing on a landmine, afraid to lift his foot. He paced near the trunk of his cruiser, the rain soaking through his uniform, plastering his shirt to his skin. "Greg, call the sergeant," Alexander Jenkins urged, her voice trembling. She was standing near the hood, hugging herself against the chill. "Call him now. Every second she sits in there is another lawsuit waiting to happen." "I'm thinking. Alexander, I'm thinking." Patterson snapped, wiping water from his eyes. His mind was racing, trying to construct a narrative that would save him. She was erratic. She reached for something. "I feared for my safety. Qualified immunity." He rehearsed the phrases in his head. They had worked before. They had worked when he roughed up that college kid in 09. They had worked during the excessive force complaint in 14. But those people didn't have a direct line to the Pentagon. Patterson keyed his radio. His hand shook. "Dispatch, Unit 4 Alpha, requesting a supervisor at my location, 1025. 1025-4 Alpha. Is the situation Code 4? The dispatcher's voice was tinny and distant. Code 4. Patterson lied. Just administrative issues. Send the watch commander. Inside the car, Cynthia closed her eyes. She wasn't praying. She was reviewing the Uniform Code of Military Justice and the specific Georgia statutes regarding the detention of federal officers. She had served in Iraq during the surge. She had negotiated logistics chains through hostile territory in Syria. She had stared down men who wanted to behead her. Greg Patterson was not a threat. He was a disappointment. She thought about her father, a Vietnam vet who had been pulled over in Alabama in 1974. He hadn't been a colonel. He had been a sergeant. They beat him so bad he walked with a limp for the rest of his life. He had told her once, "Cynthia, the uniform protects you from the enemy abroad. It doesn't always protect you from the enemy at home. When they come for you, you don't fight with your fists. You fight with your rank. You make them regret the day they learned to read." A knock on the window. It was Alexander. She looked terrified. She opened the back door a crack, letting the humid air in. "Ma'am, Colonel." Alexander corrected herself, her voice barely a whisper. I want you to know. I told him to stop. I saw the uniform." Cynthia turned her head slowly. "Officer Jenkins. Is it?" "Yes, ma'am." "Officer Jenkins, your partner is currently trying to figure out how to lie on his report. If you are smart, you will ensure your body camera is active and you will write your own report, independently. Do not let him dictate your narrative. If you lie for him, you end your career with his." Alexander swallowed hard. I know. Can I get you water? Can I loosen the cuffs?" "No," Cynthia said, her voice like iron. "You leave them exactly as they are. I want Sergeant Foley to see them." "How do you know the watch commander is Foley?" Alexander asked, stunned. "I make it my business to know the local command structures of every jurisdiction between Fort Stewart and Arlington," Cynthia said calmly. "Sergeant Tom Foley, former Marine, served in Fallujah, 2004. He's a good man. He hates incompetence." Alexander stepped back, pale. Cynthia Reynolds wasn't just a logistician. She was an intelligence officer's nightmare. She did her homework. 10 minutes later, headlights swept across the wet asphalt. A black SUV with supervisor, stenciled on the side, pulled up behind Patterson's cruiser. Sergeant Tom Foley stepped out. He was a bear of a man, bald, with a mustache that looked like it was carved from granite. He didn't run in the rain. He walked with a deliberate, heavy purpose. Patterson met him halfway. "Sarge, listen, it's a mess. She was weaving. I pulled her over. She got belligerent." "Where is the driver?" Foley asked, cutting him off. His voice was gravel. "In the back. She claims she's military, but she refused ID, started reaching for things." "Refused ID?" Foley squinted at Patterson. "Greg, your partner is standing by the suspect vehicle looking like she's about to vomit. Why, she's a rookie. Sarge, she's soft." Foley pushed past Patterson. He walked to the Range Rover first. He shone his light inside. He saw the dress blues. He saw the hat. He saw the CAC card that Alexander had left on the dashboard. Foley picked up the card. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at the name. Reynolds. He closed his eyes and exhaled a long breath. The kind of sigh a man makes when he realizes his night is ruined. He turned and walked to Patterson's cruiser. He opened the back door. The interior light flicked on. Foley saw the woman in the hoodie. He saw the handcuffs. He looked at her face. "Colonel Reynolds?" Foley asked. his voice respectful, almost pained. "Sergeant Foley," Cynthia replied, "I believe your officer has made a significant error in judgment." Foley looked at the cuffs. He looked at Patterson, who was standing a few feet away, looking sullen. "Patterson," Foley roared. The sound made the rookie jump. "Get over here." Patterson shuffled over. "Sarge, I followed protocol." "You handcuffed a full-bird colonel for a traffic stop," Foley hissed, his face inches from Patterson's. "Did she swing at you? Did she have a weapon? She was resisting." "I was standing still." "Sergeant," Cynthia said from the back seat. "Officer Patterson did not like my tone. He did not like that I knew my rights. And he certainly didn't like that I drive a car he can't afford." Foley pinched the bridge of his nose. "Colonel, I am going to remove these cuffs personally. And then I am going to ask you, very politely, not to crucify my department." "Remove them, Sergeant," Cynthia said, "but the crucifixion that has already begun." The clicking of the handcuffs unlocking was the loudest sound in the world. Cynthia rubbed her wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had bitten into her skin. She stepped out of the cruiser. She didn't stretch or rub her arms to show pain. She stood at attention, adjusting her hoodie as if it were a combat jacket. "My phone," she said, holding out her hand to Patterson. Patterson hesitated. "It's evidence. Give her the damn phone." Greg Foley barked. Patterson fished the iPhone out of his pocket and slapped it into her hand. Cynthia unlocked it. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call her husband. She tapped a contact labeled LTG Harrison, Pentagon. Lieutenant General Marcus Harrison, 3 stars. The Deputy Chief of Staff for G4 Logistics. Her boss. And a man who had the personal cell phone number of the Governor of Georgia. She put the phone on speaker. "Ring, ring." "Reynolds." A deep, gruff voice answered. "It's 2,300 hours. This better be about the Ukraine supply chain." "General," Cynthia said, her voice steady. "I am currently detained on the side of Interstate 95 in Oak Haven County, Georgia. I have been handcuffed, frisked, and arrested for attitude by an Officer Greg Patterson. I was returning from the Joint Task Force briefing. There was a silence on the other end, a dangerous silence. Are you injured, Colonel Detour? Minor contusions on the wrists. Rotator cuff is aggravated, but my dignity is the primary casualty. Sir, is the officer there? He is, along with his supervisor, Sergeant Foley. Put the sergeant on. Cynthia held the phone out to Foley. Foley looked at the device like it was a live grenade. He took it. Sergeant Foley speaking, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Sergeant! General Harrison's voice was so loud it could be heard over the rain. This is Lieutenant General Marcus Harrison, United States Army. You are holding one of my key strategic officers. She is due in Washington at 0800 for a briefing with the Secretary of Defense. If she is not on the road in 5 minutes, I will have the military police from Fort Stewart rolling down that highway, and I will personally call the governor to ask why his state patrol is harassing decorated officers. Do you read me? Loud and clear, General, Foley said, standing at attention out of instinct. There has been a misunderstanding. We are releasing her immediately. It's not a misunderstanding. Sergeant, the General growled. It's a disgrace. I want that officer's name and badge number sent to my office. We will be filing a formal complaint with the DOJ regarding civil rights violations and the harassment of federal personnel. Put Reynolds back on. Foley handed the phone back. He looked sick. I'm here. Sir, Cynthia said. Cynthia, do Do you need an extraction? I can have a chopper there in 20. Negative. Sir, I can drive, but I want this documented. I want the dash cam footage preserved. I want the body cam footage preserved. And I want an MP escort to the state line. Done. I'm waking up the Provost Marshal at Stewart now. Sit tight. Help is coming. The line went dead. Cynthia lowered the phone and looked at Patterson. The bully was gone. In his place was a man watching his pension evaporate. You can go. Colonel, Foley said quietly. We'll handle this internally. No, Sergeant, Cynthia said, walking back to her Range Rover. She opened the back door and pulled out her dress jacket, the one with the eagle on the shoulder. She put it on over her hoodie, not caring how it looked. She needed the symbol. She leaned against the hood of her car, crossing her arms. I'm not going anywhere until the MPS arrive, because I don't trust Officer Patterson not to shoot me in the back if I try to drive away. It was a brutal statement. It stripped away the last veneer of police authority. Patterson flinched as if he'd been slapped. I wouldn't. Patterson started. You already did. Cynthia said, cold. You decided I was a criminal before you saw my face. You decided I was a liar before you saw my ID. You decided I was nothing. She pointed a finger at him. You picked a fight with a black woman in a car, officer, but you lost a fight to a United States colonel, and now we are going to wait for the army to get here. And when they do, you're going to explain to a major why you put his superior officer in cuffs. 10 minutes later, the blue lights appeared. But not police lights. These were different. 3 Humvees came roaring down the highway, spraying water in massive arcs. They were followed by 2 military police sedans. They boxed the police cruisers in. Soldiers in fatigues poured out. M4 carbines slung across their chests. MP armbands visible. They moved with a precision that made the police officers look like amateurs. A major stepped out of the lead vehicle. He walked straight to Cynthia and saluted sharp and hard. Colonel Reynolds, he said. Major Davis, 3rd Infantry Division Provost Marshal Office. We are here to secure you. Cynthia returned the salute. At ease. Major, I appreciate the quick response. She turned to Sergeant Foley. The sergeant was staring at the Humvees, realizing that his little roadside stop had just turned into a federal incident. Major, Cynthia said, pointing at Patterson. That man assaulted a federal officer. I want his badge number. I want his gun taken for evidence. And I want a formal inquiry launched tonight. Major Davis turned to the police officers. He was a large man, and he looked entirely unamused. He walked up to Patterson. Officer, Davis said calmly, I need you to step away from the colonel. You are interfering with military operations. Patterson looked at Foley. Foley looked at the ground. Do what he says, Greg, Foley whispered. It's over. Patterson stepped back, the rain dripping off his nose. He watched as the soldiers formed a perimeter around Cynthia's car. He watched as the major took a statement. He watched as the power he thought he held dissolved into the wet Georgia night. But the karma was just warming up. As Cynthia prepared to leave, a black sedan pulled up behind the Humvees. It was a civilian car, but it had government plates. A man in a suit stepped out. He held an umbrella. He walked past the police, past the MPs, and up to Sergeant Foley. Sergeant Foley, the man asked. Yeah, I'm Special Agent Miller, FBI Civil Rights Division. We just got a call from the Pentagon. We'd like to seize the dash cam hard drives immediately. Patterson's knees buckled. He grabbed the hood of his cruiser to stop from falling. The Pentagon hadn't just called the MPS, they had called everyone. The rain on Interstate 95 had stopped, replaced by the flashing, silent disco of blue, red, and white lights. The roadside looked less like a traffic stop and more like a crime scene or a war zone. Special Agent Miller of the FBI stood under his umbrella. Though the rain had ceased, he used it now as a prop, a barrier between federal authority and local incompetence. He held out a plastic evidence bag. The SD cards, Sergeant Foley, Miller repeated, his voice devoid of patience. Dash cam, body cam, both officers. Now. Sergeant Foley looked at Patterson. He looked at the rookie, Alexander Jenkins. He knew that handing over this footage was essentially signing Patterson's termination papers, but refusing a federal agent on the side of a highway, with a platoon of military police watching, was suicide. "Give them to him," Foley ordered, his voice hollow. Patterson's hands shook violently as he fumbled with the clip on his chest. The camera felt heavy, like a lead weight. He popped the unit out. He handed it to Miller. I want it noted," Patterson stammered, his voice cracking. "That I felt threatened. The suspect, the subject, refused to exit the vehicle. She was non-compliant." Miller dropped the camera into the bag and sealed it with a sharp zip. He looked at Patterson with eyes that were cold and dead. "Officer Patterson," Miller said, stepping closer. "Non-compliant covers a lot of things. It covers refusing to sign a ticket. It covers arguing. It does not cover a 15-year veteran dragging a senior military officer out of her car in a rainstorm because her tone wasn't submissive enough. You didn't feel threatened. You felt disrespected. And in the eyes of the Department of Justice, confusing your ego with your safety is a civil rights violation." Miller turned to Colonel Reynolds, who was standing by the lead Humvee. A medic was applying a cold compress to her wrist. "Colonel," Miller said, his tone shifting to professional deference, "we have secured the evidence. The Bureau will take jurisdiction over the civil rights investigation. The Army can handle the rest." Cynthia nodded. She didn't look at Patterson. She looked through him. "Thank you, Agent. I expect a preliminary report on my desk by Monday." "You'll have it." Cynthia turned to Major Davis. "Major, let's move out. I have a briefing in D.C., and I'm already 2 hours late." "Yes, Ma'am," Davis shouted. "Mount up." The soldiers scrambled back into the Humvees. Engines roared to life. The convoy peeled away, the heavy tires throwing up spray, leaving the Oakhaven police officers alone in the silence of the wet highway. "Get in the car, Greg," Foley said quietly. "Sarge, get in the damn car!" Foley screamed, slamming his hand on the hood. "You're done for the night. You're done. Hand me your weapon." Patterson froze. My service weapon. Standard procedure for an officer under federal investigation," Foley spat. "Give it to me." Patterson unholstered his Glock. It felt like he was unhooking a limb. He handed it over. But first, Foley took it, cleared the chamber, ejected the magazine, and tossed the pieces into the trunk of his SUV. "Get in the passenger seat," Foley commanded. "Jenkins, you drive his cruiser back. Don't talk to him. Don't look at him." The ride back to the precinct was a funeral procession. Patterson sat in the passenger seat of his supervisor's car, watching the familiar streets of Oakhaven roll by. The 24-hour diner, the gas station where he got free coffee, the high school football field. This was his town. He was the law here. How did it go wrong so fast, he thought. She's just one woman. Just one affirmative action hire in a fancy car. He was still in denial. He still thought he could spin this. He thought about his union rep. Mike, the pit bull, Kowalski. Mike could fix anything. He'd gotten Patterson out of that mess with the teenager's broken arm 3 years ago. They arrived at the station. The mood inside was electric. News travels faster than fiber optics in a police department. By the time Patterson walked through the double doors, everyone knew. The desk sergeant didn't look up. The night shift patrolman stopped talking as he walked by. They weren't looking at him with solidarity. They were looking at him like he was contagious. "Chief wants you in his office," the desk sergeant muttered. "Now." Chief Montgomery was a small man, with glasses and a reputation for political survival. He was sitting behind his desk, staring at a monitor. On the screen, a paused frame from a security camera showed the colonel's Range Rover passing a local business. Patterson walked in. "Chief, listen, let me explain. Sit down and shut up," Montgomery said without looking up. Patterson sat. "I just got off the phone with the Pentagon," Montgomery said, finally swiveling his chair. "Do you know who called me not a colonel, a 3-star general? He asked me if I was running a police department or a roadside robbery crew." She was resisting. "Chief, she is a logistician for the Joint Chiefs of Staff." Greg Montgomery slammed a file on his desk. "She manages a budget of $4 billion. She has a security clearance higher than the governor's, and you arrested her for weaving." Montgomery leaned forward. "The FBI is already here. They're seizing our servers. They're pulling your jacket. Every stop you've made in the last 5 years. Every use of force report. Every complaint." Patterson felt a cold sweat break out. "My jacket is clean. Chief, the complaints were unsubstantiated." "Unsubstantiated by us," Montgomery corrected him. "Internal Affairs clears things because we need bodies on the street. But the feds, they don't care about our staffing levels. They care about patterns. And you, Greg, you have a pattern. You target out-of-state cars. You target minorities in luxury vehicles. We ignored it because you brought in seizure money. But now you brought in the United States Army. So you're hanging me out to dry?" Patterson asked, his voice rising in disbelief. "Blue lives matter. Right. We protect our own. We protect the badge," Montgomery said coldly. "Not the idiot who tarnishes it. You are on unpaid administrative leave, effective immediately. Surrender your badge." Patterson reached into his pocket. He pulled out the silver shield. He placed it on the desk. It made a dull clunk. "Get out," Montgomery said. "And Greg, don't leave town. The FBI agent said he might have a warrant by Tuesday." Patterson walked out of the station into the cool night air. He felt naked without his gun and badge. He walked to his personal truck, a lifted Ford F-150. He sat inside. The silence deafening. He pulled out his phone. He dialed his union rep. "Mike, it's Greg. I need help." "I heard." "Greg." Mike's voice was guarded. "It's bad. Mike, the feds are involved. But I followed protocol. I need the union to issue a statement. Say she was belligerent. Say I feared for my life." There was a long pause. "Greg," Mike said slowly. "I saw the body cam footage. Alexander Jenkins uploaded it to the cloud server before the feds took the cards. I watched it. So, you're on your own, buddy. We can't defend that. You didn't just cross the line. You sprinted past it. She told you 5 times she was a colonel. You mocked her. You yanked a woman with a torn rotator cuff out of a car while she was offering ID. The Fraternal Order of Police isn't going to bankrupt itself defending a lawsuit we can't win. We're cutting you loose." "You can't do that," Patterson screamed. "It's done. Good luck, Greg." The line went dead. Patterson stared at the phone. He was alone. But the real storm hadn't even hit yet. That would come in the morning. The internet is a cruel and efficient judge. It doesn't require due process. It only requires content. By 9 a.m. the next morning, the video was everywhere. It hadn't leaked from the police department. It had come from a passing motorist. A truck driver had seen the commotion on Hochetian 95, the woman in the hoodie being shoved against a Range Rover by a burly cop in the rain, and had started filming on his phone. The angle was grainy, but the audio was clear enough. Video title: Georgia Cop Assaults Army Colonel. Views 4.5 million, trending #1. The video showed the critical moment. Patterson screaming, Cynthia calmly stating her rank, Patterson laughing and saying, "I'm the King of England." It was the laugh that did it. That arrogant, dismissive laugh. It was the sound of a man who believed he was untouchable. In his living room, Greg Patterson sat in his underwear, staring at the TV. He held a bottle of whiskey, though it was barely noon. The news anchor on CNN was grim. Outrage in Georgia today, as video surfaces of a highly decorated UPS. Army Colonel being detained and handcuffed during a routine traffic stop. Colonel Cynthia Reynolds, a Bronze Star recipient, was returning from duty when she was pulled over by Officer Greg Patterson of the Oak Haven Police Department. The screen cut to a photo of Cynthia in her full dress uniform, sharp, impressive, undeniable. Then it cut to a photo of Patterson, his official department photo, where he looked smug. Sources tell CNN that Officer Patterson has a history of complaints regarding excessive force, though none have previously resulted in discipline. However, new allegations are surfacing this morning. Patterson's phone started ringing. It wasn't his friends. It was unknown numbers. Ring. Baby killer. Click. Ring. I hope you rot in jail. Pig. Click. Ring. We know where you live. Click. He unplugged the landline. He turned off his cell, but the screen kept going. Joining us now is civil rights attorney David Thorne, the anchor said. David, what are we looking at here? We are looking at a textbook deprivation of rights, the lawyer said, his face filling the screen. But more than that, we are seeing the breaking point. Colonel Reynolds represents the best of this country. Officer Patterson represents the worst of policing culture. And I have confirmed that the Department of Justice has opened a federal probe not just into Patterson, but into the entire Oak Haven Police Department. This is a pattern or practice investigation. Patterson just brought the DOJ down on his entire city. Patterson threw the remote at the wall. It shattered. The karma was accelerating. At 2:00 p.m., a press conference was held outside the Oak Haven precinct. Chief Montgomery stood at the podium, sweating profusely. Behind him stood the mayor, looking furious. We are announcing the immediate termination of Officer Gregory Patterson, the chief said, his voice trembling. His actions do not reflect the values of this department. Too little, too late, a protester screamed from the crowd. Furthermore, the chief continued, trying to be heard, we are reviewing all 422 arrests made by Officer Patterson in the last 5 years. The district attorney has signaled that they will be vacating convictions for any cases that relied solely on Officer Patterson's testimony. Patterson watched this on his laptop. He fell back onto his couch. Vacating convictions. That meant the drug dealers he busted, the drunk drivers, the guys he roughed up. They were all going to walk, and they were all going to sue him. But the final twist of the knife came at 4:00 p.m. Colonel Reynolds gave her statement. She didn't do it in a press room. She did it standing outside the Pentagon. She wore her dress blues. She looked immaculate. Reporters thrust microphones at her. Colonel, do you hate the police? Cynthia stopped. She looked at the cameras with that same calm intensity she had shown on the roadside. I do not hate the police, she said, her voice carrying without shouting. I have brothers and sisters in arms who wear the badge. My father was a sergeant. Law enforcement is a noble profession. She paused, letting the silence build. But a badge is a symbol of public trust. It is heavy. If you are too weak to carry it without crushing the people you serve, you should put it down. Officer Patterson didn't just violate my rights. He betrayed every good officer who puts on that uniform. He tried to humiliate me, but dignity is not something a man can take from you. It is something you keep. She looked directly into the lens. Patterson felt like she was looking right at him in his living room. To the young men and women watching this, do not let anyone tell you who you are. If you know your worth, no amount of rain and no amount of handcuffs can strip that away. That is all. She turned and walked back into the Pentagon. Patterson turned off the laptop. The silence in his house was absolute. Then, a knock at the door. Loud, heavy, authoritative. Bang, bang, bang. Gregory Patterson, federal agents. Open the door. Patterson stood up. He looked around his living room, the recliner, the flat screen, the framed photos of him fishing. It was a small, comfortable life. And it was over. He walked to the door. He opened it. Agent Miller stood there, flanked by 4 other agents in FBI windbreakers. Gregory Patterson, Miller said, holding up a warrant. You are under arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law, false imprisonment, and assault on a federal officer. Patterson started, but he had no words left. Miller spun him around. Hands behind your back. The cuffs clicked. They were tight, tighter than he had put them on Cynthia. You're hurting me, Patterson whined instinctively. Miller leaned in close, his voice a whisper. Comfort isn't my priority. As they walked him to the waiting SUV, the neighbors were watching. People were filming with their phones. Patterson lowered his head, trying to hide his face, but everyone saw him. The bully was finally the one in the back seat. The wheels of justice grind slowly, but when they catch something, they crush it to dust. It took 18 months for the United States versus Gregory Patterson to reach a verdict. The trial wasn't a spectacle. It was a dissection. The defense tried to argue that Patterson had made a good faith error in a high-stress environment. They brought in experts on police procedure who talked about the dangers of traffic stops at night. But the prosecution didn't need experts. They had the video. They played it in slow motion. They played it with the audio enhanced. They played the part where Cynthia offered her ID 3 times. They played the part where Patterson laughed. Cynthia Reynolds sat in the front row every day. She wore civilian clothes, a simple navy suit. She didn't wear her uniform because she didn't want to make it about the army. She wanted it to be about the citizen. She wanted the jury to see that a black woman in a hoodie deserves the same dignity as a general in dress blues when the verdict was read. The courtroom was silent. Guilty on count 1, deprivation of rights under color of law. Guilty on count 2, false imprisonment. Patterson didn't cry. He just looked deflated, like a balloon that had been sitting in the corner for a week. He looked at his wife, who was weeping in the gallery. He looked at his lawyer, who was packing up his briefcase with the efficiency of a man who had already cashed the check. The judge, a stern woman named Horowitz, who had no patience for bullies, leaned over the bench. "Mr. Patterson," she said, removing her glasses. "You were given a badge, a gun, and the trust of this community. You used them to terrorize a woman because you didn't like her tone. You didn't like that she wasn't afraid of you. Well, today, the fear is yours. Sentence 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Patterson was remanded into custody immediately. As the marshals led him away, clinking the same cuffs onto his wrists that he had used on so many others, he looked back one last time. He locked eyes with Cynthia. He expected gloating. He expected a smirk, but Cynthia just nodded. A slow, solemn nod. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. The transaction is complete. The fallout in Oak Haven was seismic. The Department of Justice released its report 3 months later. It was scathing. The Oak Haven Police Department was found to have a systematic pattern of discriminatory stops. The city was placed under a consent decree, forcing a complete overhaul of its hiring, training, and use of force policies. Chief Montgomery was forced into early retirement. The mayor lost his re-election bid in a landslide. The city settled Cynthia's civil suit for $3.5 million. She didn't keep a dime. She donated the entire amount to the Legal Defense Fund for Unlawful Detainment and established a scholarship for children of incarcerated parents. 2 years later, the auditorium at Fort Stewart was packed. The air conditioning hummed, fighting the Georgia heat. Flags lined the stage, the stars and stripes, the Army flag, the Logistics Corps flag. Cynthia stood at attention on the stage. Her uniform was crisp, the creases sharp enough to cut paper. But the insignia on her shoulder had changed. General Marcus Harrison, now a 4-star general, stood in front of her. He held a small velvet box. "Colonel Reynolds," Harrison said, his voice booming without a microphone. "You have served this nation with distinction in logistics, in strategy, and in character. You have moved mountains of steel across oceans. But more importantly, you have moved the needle on what it means to lead with integrity." He opened the box. Inside was a single silver star. "It is my honor," Harrison said, "to promote you to the rank of Brigadier General." Cynthia's husband, a quiet, proud man named David, stepped up to pin the star on her left shoulder. Her father, the old Vietnam vet with the limp, pinned the star on her right. His hands shook, tears streaming down his face. He whispered something to her that the microphones didn't catch. "They didn't break you, baby girl. They just polished the steel." Cynthia smiled. She looked out at the sea of faces, young lieutenants, grizzled sergeants, families. She took the podium. "Thank you," she began. "A general's star is heavy. It carries the weight of every soldier under your command. It carries the weight of the decisions you make." She paused, looking at the back of the room. Standing there, leaning against the wall, was Alexander Jenkins. Alexander was no longer a rookie. She was a detective now. She had testified against Patterson. She had stayed on the force, endured the hazing from the old guard, and come out the other side as a leader of the new reform unit. Cynthia nodded to her. Alexander nodded back. "We are defenders," Cynthia continued. "Whether we wear camouflage or blue, our job is to protect, not to dominate, not to rule. To protect. Power without discipline is just bullying, and authority without humility is just tyranny." She took a deep breath. 2 years ago, a man told me he was the King of England. He thought power was something you take. He was wrong. Power is something you earn, every single day, by how you treat the person who can do absolutely nothing for you. The applause was thunderous. It washed over her, not as adulation, but as validation. Later that evening, as the reception wound down, Cynthia walked out to her car. It was the same charcoal grey Range Rover. It started to rain, a light, warm drizzle. She unlocked the door and got in. She sat in the driver's seat, listening to the rhythm of the drops on the roof. She looked in the rearview mirror. No blue lights, no sirens, just the quiet dark of a Georgia night. She started the engine. She put her hands at 10 and 2. She didn't drive away in fear. She didn't drive away in anger. She drove away as Brigadier General Cynthia Reynolds, heading home to her family, on a road that finally felt like it belonged to her. Greg Patterson learned a hard lesson. That night, the badge on your chest doesn't make you a king, and the hoodie on a driver doesn't make them a criminal. He saw a target. The world saw a hero. General Reynolds didn't just win a court case. She proved that true strength isn't about how loud you can yell. It's about how long you can stand your ground when you know you're right. What would you have done in Colonel Reynolds's seat? Would you have kept your cool, or would you have fought back? It's a question of character that most of us hope we never have to answer. If this story of justice and karma hit home for you, do me a favor, hit that like button so we can share this message with more people. And if you want more stories where the arrogant get humbled and the good guys win, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. You don't want to miss the next one. Stay safe. Know your rights. And remember, dignity is the one thing they can't take unless you give it to them. See you in the next video.